It's just past midnight in Ouagadougou, and something isn't right. Burkina Faso's intelligence agents are listening in on a strange phone call. On the line, the Burkinabe army officer and a known terrorist commander. They're talking coordinates, military position, timing, and then it clicks. A plan is in motion to neutralize a high-profile target. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is the subject yet again. A group of rogue soldiers is teaming up with jihadis. The same terrorists the army is supposed to be fighting. Their goal is to storm the presidential palace and plunge the country into chaos. And this isn't just talks. They've got inside help, access, weapons, and a clear timeline. But here's the interesting part. This is not the first time. It's not even the second. Since Traoré seized power in 2022, there have been at least 5 serious attempts to assassinate him or overthrow his government. From former presidents plotting in exile, to bribes offered to his own bodyguards, to rumors of foreign governments pulling the strings. So, who's really trying to kill Ibrahim Traoré? And why does it feel like the entire world has a stake in whether he lives or dies? I want to show you the timeline of events related to the coup and assassination attempts on Captain Ibrahim Traoré since becoming the leader of Burkina Faso in 2022. This will include identifying key actors involved in these plots, their sponsors, and operational bases. This will help us piece together clues as to who is really trying to kill this revolutionary leader and the geopolitical calculations influencing the situation in Burkina Faso. It happened in September 2022. This 34-year-old army captain, Ibrahim Traoré, had just pulled off something very few in Africa's modern history had done. Burkina Faso had already seen its government toppled that year in a military coup led by this guy, Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, with the civilian president removed for failure to address grave security concerns in the country. But just 8 months into his rule, Damiba was gone, exiled in the dead of the night, and in his place stood this young man, Ibrahim Traoré, promising to fix the country, something everyone before him had failed to do. His focus was stopping the jihadist insurgency tearing the country apart. This task, as noble as it sounds, came with a price. What Traoré didn't factor in was that his life would be on the line. Soon after being sworn in as transitional president of the ruling military council, unknown forces began plotting to take out Traoré. And while the junta has reported an incredible 18 attempts to take him out, we will focus on the 5 most serious of those attempts, with each one more complex than the last. We'll begin in December 2022. Barely 3 months after taking power, whispers of a coup began to surface. A group of military officers, including high-profile commander Lieutenant Colonel Emmanuel Zongrona, were arrested for plotting to storm key state sites, notably the state TV station, military prison, and Traoré's own residence. The plan was being carried out by a team loyal to Zongrona. They had a code name, Green Mamba. The plot included a full-blown tactical operation to free Zongrona from jail and launch a counter-coup. But who is this guy? Lieutenant Colonel Emmanuel Zongrona is a former commander in Burkina's army, a veteran of the anti-terror campaign. Zongrana had been jailed in January 2022 under ex-president Kabore for an earlier coup attempt, but was freed shortly after Traoré came into power, only to quickly emerge as a rebel leader against Traoré. His co-conspirators included CW Charles Neboa and Sergeant Adama Traoré, who tried to spring him from prison and attack the junta. While there are no direct foreign links with Zongrana, he is part of the Burkinabe Army Green Mamba Special Unit. Zongrana is thought to represent a faction of the military dissatisfied with the new junta, perhaps out of loyalty to the ousted Damiba, as well as dissatisfaction with Traoré's rapid rise over senior officers in the military. Well, thanks to an internal tip, the plot was stopped. Zongrana was rearrested in December 2022. 9 months after this first coup attempt was thwarted by the military, the unknown forces struck yet again. September 2023, almost a year into Traoré's rule, Burkina's intelligence services picked up chatter. Senior officers were plotting this time again. A tip led to the arrest of 3 soldiers, including former intelligence officers who were secretly scouting the homes of Traoré and other junta leaders. According to state officials, these individuals aimed to assassinate leaders and spark chaos. This arrest, though low profile, uncovered something much darker. There were elements outside the country trying to sow seeds of discontent within the military. Around the same time, the French media went into an overdrive mode, putting out reports of rumored mutiny within the military. This caused tensions with the Traoré administration, leading to the government suspending the French news magazine Jeune Afrique in late September 2023. Thousands of pro-Traoré demonstrators rallied in Ouagadougou in support of their president. Then came the major coup attempt. On the 9th of September 26, 2023, signals of a coup emerged when a pro-Traoré social media group called citizens to rally, and small anti-Traoré protests briefly erupted the next morning. By that evening, the junta announced it had thwarted a conspiracy by senior officers aimed at plunging the country into chaos. 4 officers were arrested and 2 fled. The officers detained included Lieutenant Colonel Sheikh Hamza Ouattara, commander of the Special Gendarmerie Legion, Captain Christophe Mega, Deputy Commander of the Gendarmerie Special Intervention Unit, Commander Abdulaziz Wawa, Head of the Army Special Forces, and Lieutenant Colonel Boubacar Keita, Director of the Civil Protection Institute. The 2 fugitives were later identified as former intelligence officers. One was a recently sacked intel chief, Lieutenant Colonel Sekou Ouedraogo. All had significant roles in the security apparatus. Notably, former intel chief Lieutenant Colonel Sekou Ouedraogo was suspected as the instigator behind this coup. This group is affiliated with Burkinabe Special Forces, Gendarmerie, and intelligence services, likely those who had served under Damiba's junta and felt sidelined by Traoré. The junta did not publicly link them to any foreign sponsor in this case, meaning this could be an internally driven coup attempt. Their motivations seemed rooted in personal power struggles and dissatisfaction with Traoré's leadership. But the question is, since French media speculation about military splits was high around this time, how much of that speculation inspired this coup attempt? Well, the coup was stopped just in time. By October 2023, not willing to take any more chances, Traoré purged key positions within the military and reshuffled his security leadership. However, 3 months later, there was yet another attempt on his life. On January 14, 2024, plotters planned to attack Traoré's regime from within. This one was somehow personal. A few days before it was set to happen, a member of Traoré's own presidential guard confessed he had been offered $5 million to assassinate the president during prayer. And it gets darker. Authorities arrested a man named Hamidou Kabore, believed to be related to Traoré himself. Hundreds of audio recordings were found on his devices, mapping out a plot to bomb the residence where Traoré slept. Burkina's military prosecutors called it the obstinate attempt to destabilize the country. But this time, there were signs of foreign money involved. Traoré's team claimed the plot wasn't just domestic, it was sponsored. The government revealed it arrested a network of military officers, active and retired, plus civilians and activists who conspired to seize power. While official statements did not name the ringleaders, Russian media said an quote uncle of ex-president Damiba was behind an explosive plot in this period, suggesting figures tied to the old regime were involved. Those arrested are said to have ties to elements within the presidential security detail and some with close connections to Damiba. While the source wasn't explicitly named, circumstantial evidence and later accusations suggest French or regional proxies may have lent support in this coup attempt. Traoré soon accused France, Ivory Coast, and even Benin Republic of sponsoring a destabilization campaign against his regime. Even though Traoré cheated deaths here again, the plotters were not ready to give up. In late September 2024, Burkina's security minister announced the regime had dismantled a far-reaching plot orchestrated from abroad, this time from Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. The government accused individuals residing in Côte d'Ivoire of coordinating a 3-phase plan to overthrow Traoré. According to authorities, 14 people were implicated, including former junta leader Damiba, 2 former ministers, and 2 journalists, as well as unnamed Western intelligence agents. The military segment of this conspiracy was allegedly being led by the exiled former coup leader Damiba. The plot's phase 1 allegedly involved stoking chaos via terrorist attacks, Officials claimed a jihadist raid in August 2024 that killed 100 plus civilians in central Burkina Faso was part of this plan. Phase 2 of the plot involved armed assault on key installations in Ouagadougou. The selected targets included a presidential palace, a military drone base, and the main airport. Phase 3 entailed attacks near the Ivory Coast border, perhaps to incite a regional crisis. According to Burkinabe authorities, these later phases were averted thanks to arrest and intelligence sharing. Several suspects were caught in Niger, and a major operations center in Abidjan was exposed. 2 military deserters based in Ivory Coast, Commander Johnny Compaoré and Abdurrahmane Barry, were singled out as key recruiters who had fled Burkina and were rallying mercenaries for the coup. You see, after being deposed, Damiba found refuge first in Togo and later in Côte d'Ivoire. From here, he has been accused of coordinating attacks on his own country, probably trying to get back into power. Western intelligence agents were also accused of participating in this coup plot. Another key figure is former President Blaise Compaoré, who was in exile in Abidjan since 2014. While not directly cited in these coup plots, it is believed that he cast a long shadow over Traoré's regime. Traoré's government convicted Compaoré in absentia for the assassination of Thomas Sankara, and Compaoré's allies in the region, notably Ivorian leadership, are suspected of undermining the new revolutionary regime. It would not be surprising if Compaoré's network of loyalists or elements of his party have lent support to destabilizing Traoré, whom they might view as ideologically aligned with Sankara's legacy. These former leaders, with motivations to go against Traoré, were all welcomed in Ivory Coast. Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara has close ties to Compaoré and took a hard line against the wave of Sahel coups, creating a hospitable environment for Burkinabe dissidents in Abidjan. Hence, Ivory Coast has been called the chief enabler and providing a safe haven and possibly logistical support to plotters. The Burkinabe government has officially accused the Ivorian leadership of complicity, stating there is indeed a center of operations in Abidjan to destabilize our country. In Traoré's words, quote, "Those who run Ivory Coast are collaborating with France against Burkina." Beyond Ivory Coast, France itself is implied as a sponsor of the exiled opposition. Traoré had said repeatedly in July 2024 that his government had proof of destabilization orchestrated by France and supported by Benin and Ivory Coast. France has a military presence and intelligence assets in those neighboring countries, which Burkina claims are being used to foment coups. For example, Traoré had alleged that France operates hidden bases in Benin aimed at Burkina and that French agents have worked with terrorists as part of this strategy. While France has publicly denied those accusations, the Ivorian government has refused to hand over Burkinabe suspects, effectively protecting this base of operations. The tension between both countries has been rising ever since then. Then came the April 2025 coup attempt, when all hell broke loose. This one blurred the lines. Burkina Faso's intelligence intercepted communication between a rogue officer and a terrorist commander. They were planning a joint strike on the presidential palace. The palace assault, timed with jihadist attacks, aimed to create total chaos and force a foreign intervention. Security Minister Mahamadou Sana announced the junta had thwarted a plan to storm the presidential palace on April 16, 2025. Uniquely, this plot involved a coalition of rogue soldiers and terrorist insurgents working together. One serving officer named in this attack was Captain René David Ouedraogo, accused of rallying troops to the plan. He remains on the run. Several current and former soldiers were arrested, such as Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Ouedraogo, an ex-commander of the Military Justice Unit, and Captain Elisi Tazembedo, commander in the Northern Security Zone. Sana also explicitly alleged the instigators are based in Ivory Coast, directing events via intermediaries. You see, a unique aspect of recent plots, the ones in September 2024 and April 2025, is the alleged involvement of armed Islamist groups in coup plans. Burkina Faso faces a brutal insurgency from militants linked with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Traoré's government claims that rogue officers have colluded with jihadist leaders, using terror attacks to destabilize the state as a prelude to a coup. For instance, the enormous August 2024 attack that killed at least 100 villagers in Basalago was attributed by officials to conspirators manipulating jihadists. Essentially, terrorist commanders became de facto actors in these plots, whether knowingly or not. Being steered into certain attacks by coup plotters, it raises the question as to the real faces behind the terror attacks facing this country since 2015. Well, now that we know the key actors behind the recent assassination attempts on Captain Ibrahim Traoré, let's try to piece together the motivation behind these incessant coup attempts. Why would anyone want Traoré dead? I've carefully identified some reasons why Traoré's government is under relentless attack with persistent coup and assassination plots. The first being the ongoing insecurity concerns leading to rising military dissatisfaction. You see, the primary rationale behind Traoré's coup back in 2022 was the previous government's failure to end the jihadist insurgency. And while Captain Traoré has rolled out many initiatives being deployed in the fight against jihadists in the country, the war is not won yet. Burkina Faso continues to face deadly terrorist attacks, some of which have been collaborations between terrorist gangs and coup plotters, like the August 2024 attack that led to the death of over 100 civilians. The country still ranks high amongst the world's most impacted by terrorism, a crisis that is now being largely ignored because of Traoré's desire to cut out Western influence from his country. It seems almost like blackmail at this point. The powers that be don't mind sponsoring terror attacks in Burkina Faso as long as that means they are allowed back into the country to continue the status quo of imperialism. This has been a major challenge for Traoré's administration. It is also notable that Traoré is a junior officer, a captain, who leapfrogged over many higher-ranking commanders. Some of those senior officers, illustrated by the involvement of lieutenant colonels and commanders in plots, may resent taking orders from a much younger leader, especially as battlefield losses mount. You know, the prestige and resources that come with leading a junta in a time of war, including control of defense budgets, foreign military aid, etc., could motivate ambitious officers to stage their own coups. In short, frustration within the military, either genuine patriots frustrated by failure or opportunists seeking power, is a driving force behind some of these plots. Another reason for the incessant coup attempts is factionalism from previous regimes. When Traoré came into power in 2022, there was an internal junta hierarchy that existed under Damiba. Damiba himself is a product of the military elite. He and many officers were trained by France or under Compaoré's long rule. Traoré's takeover split the armed forces' loyalties. A faction remains loyal to Damiba or to the idea of a more traditional military regime, and they likely view Traoré's populist revolutionary rhetoric with suspicion. The December 2022 and September 2024 conspiracies in particular suggest Damiba's loyalists never gave up. They regrouped in exile or within intelligence circles to undermine the new president. Additionally, elements loyal to ex-President Compaoré between 1987 to 2014 might see Traoré as a threat. Traoré has invoked the legacy of Thomas Sankara, who was overthrown by Compaoré, vowing that, quote, what happened to Captain Sankara will not happen to Captain Traoré. This could lead Compaoré's old networks, including those in businesses, military, and political spheres, to finance or support attempts to remove Traoré before he consolidates a Sankara-like revolution. The domestic political context, therefore, is one of unresolved rifts. Each coup in 2022 created winners and losers among power brokers, and the losers, be it Damiba's camp or the old political order, have strong incentive to reverse their fortunes by eliminating Traoré. There is also the public opinion and civilian actors. You see, domestically, Captain Traoré enjoys a significant level of popular support, especially among youth and those who favor Pan-African anti-colonial ideas. This public support has been a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it has deterred would-be plotters, knowing that mass protests would likely erupt to defend Traoré, as indeed happened in September 2023 and April 2025. On the other hand, though, the junta's popular legitimacy, despite blocking election, threatens different interest groups. For example, civil society activists and watchdogs were reportedly targeted by the January 2024 conspirators. The plotters intended to manipulate citizen groups to turn against Traoré's MPSR junta. This indicates that opposing factions are aware that to remove Traoré, they must also convince or neutralize his base of civilian support. Some civilian elites, such as politicians from ousted regimes or businessmen affected by Traoré's policies, likely back the anti-Traoré plot. The government has implied that domestic economic operators and even community leaders have participated in destabilization efforts. Lastly, on the local front is the ideology and vision for Burkina Faso. Traoré has since positioned himself as a champion of Pan-African sovereignty, vowing to never kneel again before foreign powers. Domestically, he has harnessed nationalist sentiments. Example, renaming the country's main university after Thomas Sankara and launching programs to regain economic independence, such as local gold refining, food self-sufficiency drives, etc. This vision, while popular among youth, disrupts the interest of those who thrived under dependency on France or integration in Western-backed structures. Thus, ideological opponents inside Burkina, pro-France figures or simply those averse to Traoré's confrontational style, could be complicit in plots to remove him and reverse the policy course. So, there you have it. Those are my 4 reasons for the incessant assassination attempts on Captain Traoré. But how about the geopolitics involved here? The struggle over Burkina Faso's leadership cannot be separated from the broader geopolitical context of the Sahel. The coup and assassination attempts against President Traoré have been fueled not only by domestic politics, but by competing international interests in the region's natural resources, strategic alignments, and counter-terrorism efforts. Some key underlying factors include natural resources and economic control. You see, Burkina Faso is rich in gold. It is one of Africa's top gold producers, approximately 50 to 60 tons per year. Control of the state means control of mining permits, revenues, and partnerships. There is a widespread perception in Burkina that foreign powers, notably France, but also the US and others, want to secure access to these resources or prevent them from falling into rival hands, namely Russia. Captain Traoré has made symbolic moves to gain sovereignty over these resources. For example, launching Burkina Faso's first domestically refined gold bar in 2023 and reviewing mining contracts. The US suspects Traoré might be shipping gold to pay Russia via the Wagner Group, or otherwise not channeling it through the usual global markets. Indeed, Ghana's president alleged that a mine in southern Burkina was granted to Wagner, a claim that Burkina denied. Nonetheless, Russia has shown interest in African gold, as seen in Sudan and Mali, and Traoré's pivot opens the door to Russian firms. Meanwhile, Western companies like French, Canadian, Australian that have historically dominated Burkina's mining sector may fear nationalization or loss of contracts. This economic tug of war forms a backdrop to the political instability happening in the country right now. There is also the strategic alliances, the West versus Russia and the new Sahel bloc. The attempts on Traoré's life occur amid an ongoing realignment in the Sahel. In 2022 to 2023, Burkina Faso, Mali, and later Niger, until the Nigerian coup leaders were deposed by another coup in 2023, all shifted away from France and towards alternative partnership, primarily Russia, but also China and regional peers. Traoré, Goïta in Mali, and their allies formed the Alliance of Sahel States in late 2023 as a security pact to mutual defense and potentially joint economic initiatives. This new alliance explicitly positions itself against external interference and has even withdrawn from ECOWAS structures that are seen as Western influenced. The broader geopolitical goal of this grouping is to pursue an independent path, which includes diversifying partners, including inviting Turkish drones, receiving Russian military training, and etc. For Western powers, this is a troubling trend. It diminishes the influence of France and US in the region they deem vital for counterterrorism and stability. Thus, from a geopolitical realist perspective, countries like France, the US, and their regional allies such as Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Nigeria have a vested interest in a leadership change in Ouagadougou that might pull Burkina Faso back from the Russian camp. This doesn't necessarily mean they would orchestrate a coup, but it explains their cold attitude toward Traoré and the possible support, tacit or direct, for Burkinabe factions that promise a pro-West orientation. For example, a restored Damiba or another French-trained officer in power would likely reconnect with France and rejoin the Western fold. On the flip side, Russia's geopolitical calculation is to encourage the survival of Traoré's regime as part of expanding its multipolar influence. Moscow's long game sees the Sahel as an area to displace Western military presence, which it largely has, with French and UN forces ousted from Mali, Burkina Faso, and now Niger. And to possibly gain naval or air access, there were rumors of Mali offering Russia a base. Either way, Burkina Faso is fast becoming a geopolitical battleground for West versus Russia, and it is one worth keeping an eye on. So there you have it. The repeated coup and assassination attempts against Ibrahim Traoré are not random acts of insubordination, but rather the flashpoints of a much larger geopolitical contest. The Sahel region's future alignment, whether it remains in the Western camp or pivots fully to new alliances, may hinge on Burkina Faso's trajectory. For now, Traoré has survived through a mix of popular mobilization, loyalist support within the army, and timely intelligence. Each foiled plot has further radicalized his rhetoric and ideas, pushing Burkina into deeper alignment with anti-West forces. But the big question is Traoré a walking corpse waiting for that one last coup?